I need a switcher. Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And today, we are talking about Freemasons and Fungus. Or parasites, sorry. I had that locked into my head, and that's basically the same thing. So, yeah. Cody, how are you this evening?
I'm well.
You're
How
well.
are you, Gary?
I'm pretty good today. I can't complain.
Only the Father is good, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. Yes, you're right. You're right. So, Trevor is not going to be able to be with us today. He had a loss of the family, so we wish him well, and prayers go out to him and his. And well, it's just going to be us tonight. We got to hold down the fort. So, all right. Well,
sure.
I guess. Oh, also, if there's time, we'll talk about Wes Huff on Michael Knowles. And if there's more time, we'll talk about those guys that weren't happy with Wes Huff because he got the Hebrew wrong or something. So we'll just play that. We'll play the last part of this by ear, but we've got the first half of the show figured out. So
yeah, we sure do.
We are going to start off with the Freemasons. Now, the Freemasons are kind of a weird thing because there are some people that are like, they control everything. Yeah. And, a lot of this, I kind of like the Freemason theory myself because basically it does a good job explaining how the conspiracy theory stuff kind of ties together because, the CIA may call it a conspiracy theory, but really what it is it's a good old boys club.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of old guys wearing silly clothes, doing pageantry, to feel like they have secrets when they're really just trust fund kids with lots of time and too much money. So I particularly like the Freemason thing. And I don't know if we'll actually come across this part in the videos tonight, but Bill Schneblin is the guy we're going to be watching. He was into the Freemason thing for a while, and he has a wonderful line. I don't know if we'll come across it whenever we watch this video or not, but in case we don't, I'll just lead with it. He said, the thing that killed the Freemasons was television. Because apparently when people can watch TV and do stuff on the weekend, nobody wants to go out and walk around in funny garments. So, now I should be fair, the Freemasons do some nice stuff. When I had appendicitis at 6, the Shriners actually paid for my surgery. Mm-hmm. So there was that. But, a lot of it's not all good. And a lot of this also ties into the occult, which I found was interesting. Yeah. So
I know somebody that was born with club feet, and the Shriners took care of her.
Really?
Yeah, fixed all of it.
Yeah, it's not all bad. Over the years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it turned out we really needed the Shriners because I almost died. The number's grown over the years. It started out 3 times or something, then it became 8 times, and it became 12 times. So I don't know how many times I actually died during that surgery, but it was, bottom line is the surgery got way more expensive than it was supposed to because my anesthesiologist turned out to be a dentist. So things went horribly awry.
They're synonymous now.
Yeah, well, there you go. And that was before Obamacare. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start off with hearing old Bill Schneblin's story, and then we'll go back to one of his videos that I think I wasn't able to. I didn't confirm it, but I'm pretty sure the next video we're going to be watching is from '98. So that's one thing. Believe him or not believe him, he's been telling the same story for about 30 years at this point. So, it's a point in his favor in my book, anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right,
Consistency.
Yes, consistency. All right, so here we go.
In the lodge by 20 years. And this guy comes forward and he says, we're going to lead you through this oath. But it's this long, involved, and ultimately blood-curdling oath. But none of these men...
Right,
and he said, if you want to be a priest...
Sorry, I don't want to get hit by copyright if I can help it.
Yeah, all that music.
Yeah. That music will get us in trouble. Come on. There we go. We'll just do that.
When I got to college, and again, I wanted to be a priest. This was a minor seminary college, Loras College. At the time, it was a minor seminary. It isn't anymore. I had a priest in my theology class who had a doctorate in theology, and he was teaching a course in Christology. Because again, I was wanting to be a priest. And he took me aside and he said, if you want to be a priest, in the Catholic Church, it's taught, sacerdotes est altus Christus, the priest is another Christ. So if you want to be like Christ, he says to me, do you want to be like Christ? And I says, well, of course. Doesn't every Christian want to be like Christ? He said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you need to do what Christ did. And again, that made sense. And again, nowadays we've kind of become suspicious about priests. But this was like 1968. And a priest was like God. I mean, whatever the priest said, that was it, And he said, well, if you want to be like Christ, you need to do what he did. And he went to the East and studied with the gurus in India. He went and studied with the lamas in Tibet. He went to Egypt.
Sorry, what?
I just said allegedly.
Allegedly. Yes, allegedly.
Egypt and studied with the magicians there. That's how he...
Oh, I should also take this moment anyway. The YouTube channel is called Almost False, so they have a lot of interesting stuff. It's pretty good. It's pretty wild. Bill Schneblin actually claims that he was turned into a vampire for a little bit, so we may have to go into that at some point. It's pretty wild stuff.
That might tie into our parasitic conversation later.
Maybe. Dude, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, we could have went Freemasons, vampires to parasites. Hindsight's 2020, man. Anyway.
I thought COVID was in 2020.
Yes. COVID-19 in 2020, way longer than it should have. I would call that a parasite, but it was made in the lab, so anyway.
Well, allegedly. I don't think it existed.
Oh, you don't think so? Well, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK are about to come out with a bunch of docs. Apparently, they're saying Obama and Fauci kind of were a little more involved in that than previously believed. It didn't actually. They were saying the claim is that they're going to come out in the next couple of days and say that the virus is actually created in America, then shipped to China for plausible deniability. I'll be interested to see if those documents come out.
Huh.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think it's all, they can say whatever they want about viruses. I don't think they exist. They just like say shit. So, but like, I think what makes you sick is like the fear, like how you yawn, that's an empathic response. Like whenever you see somebody yawn, you yawn.
Mm-hmm.
I think whenever your body detoxes alcohol and the shit that fast food and all the shit we put in our bodies have to detox that every so often. And whenever we see each other doing that, our bodies recognize it like a yawn. And they're like, oh, I need to do that too.
Okay. Well, I mean, I certainly think there are viruses. I just think that a lot of the stuff that we've seen over the last few years has been more man-made and created by us, quote-unquote, fixing things. Yeah. You know, like Lyme disease, which was confirmed to be a government thing, by the way.
Yeah.
So
it came from like a military island, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, but the Fed helps us because they love us. So, anyway.
I'm helping.
To raise the dead, to walk on water, to do all these miracles. So he says, what you need to do is you need to start studying the occult. And this is a priest telling me this. And so I thought, okay, now mind you, this is obviously decades before there was an internet. I mean, there was a little bookstore downtown. And I went there and I found a few scattering books on like the occult. And I found this book that was called Diary of a Witch by Sybil Leek. And she was one of the very first witches to, so to speak, come out of the broom closet. She was a British.
Her name was Sybil Leech.
I'm sure that was an alias. So
it has to be.
Yeah.
Like Leech is a parasite. Sybil.
I don't know what Sybil
I'm not
means,
sure what connotation that holds, but it's in Harry Potter.
Yeah, I don't know who would want to name them. Who would want a last name of Leech anyway? So I'm pretty sure that's I'm pretty sure that's an alias.
woman, and she was a medium. And anyhow, I read the book, and she was asserting in the book that witches were not evil, that this was an ancient pagan mystery religion. Among other things, she claimed that Jesus was a witch and his 12 apostles were his coven, along with their wives, you know. So I kind of...
In Egypt recently, I think Titus Kennedy found a cup that claimed that Christ was a magician. So it was like when... in Egypt, the stories of Christ kind of got morphed into mysticism pretty early. So, you know, that's just something to throw out there. But anyway.
Bought into that. And I found out about this guy, Alex Sanders, who was the supposed king of the witches over in London. I sent him a letter. This is around 1968, 69. And his wife sent me back a thing. Okay, here's a coven in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 90 minutes from Dubuque. I went there and I got initiated as a witch. And then later on, I hooked up with an Alexandrian coven in Boston, and I was made a witch high priest.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were telling me to pause. I thought you had something to say. Sorry.
No, I just did my thing that I always do constantly.
Oh, sweet.
My bad.
Oh, you're good.
Started covens in first of all in Dubuque, where I was, and then moved to Milwaukee because there was a fellow.
We're gonna jump
there
ahead to degrees
who,
of
had an
Freemasons.
occult.
Let me just skip ahead here. Basically, he got real heavy into the occult, and then as he was messing around in the occult, they eventually told him he needed to get into Freemasonry because it was connected to the occult, and if he wanted to graduate to the next level, he had to become a Freemason. That was the claim.
Yeah.
So we'll skip ahead and go to degrees of Freemasonry.
Before we actually get to that part, I want to make sure to take some time to talk about Freemasonry, because Freemasonry, it's very rare to actually talk about to talk to former Masons, because it's something that you're not supposed to talk about. So it's kind of an opportunity while I have you here to kind of, for me,
it's like Fight Club with aprons.
Yeah, no, I think like once you get like 30, after the 33rd degree or whatever it is, or the 32nd degree, you take an oath where you say, if I tell the secrets, then you can kill me. Like it's
it's great. Yeah, it's like you get up to the 33 and they're like, surprise, our God is Satan.
Yeah.
It's like all that years of training for nothing. You worship the devil, chump.
Yeah. That God we were talking about, yeah, that's actually a demiurge.
Yeah. Whoops. So.
Learn, but also for the people to kind of have a knowledge about what Freemasonry is. You said that you became a Master Mason. Can you explain how the degrees and the lodges are set up in Freemasonry so people actually understand what we're talking about?
Well, the basic thing is what's called the Blue Lodge. And that consists of 3 degrees: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and Master Mason. A lot of Masons never go any further than that. I did, but basically, it's like an initiatory process. The requirements are you have to, at that time, now mind you, I think I joined in 75. You had to be a man, freeborn, of good report, and well recommended. So they asked you if you believe in God, and I said, yes, I did. And they didn't ask which God I believed in. They just, do you believe in God? And I said, yes. I didn't tell them that the God I believed in had horns. So anyhow, I went through there's this whole process. You do a lot of memory work, they call it. You memorize all of these ritual things. You have a mentor who's called your poster, who's an older Mason.
Okay, actually, if he's not going to go into more detail, I think I'm just going to skip ahead to the next video, which is like from 1998. And he breaks down this stuff in the more detail. Bottom line is Freemasonry is kind of tied to the occult. I thought maybe he'd go into more detail but must be later on in the video. So we'll just go to one of his earlier ones. So this is from the Prophecy Club way back when. And Hot Man a Minute on their YouTube channel produced this. Hot Man a Minute. So this is
Yikes.
Yeah, right. So this is an old one. Here we go. We'll just go into that.
But yet most people understand that this is a secret society. And what are they keeping secret? And is this something that Christians should be involved in? Well, we're going to try and explore some of that tonight and see if we can't get to the bottom of some of these issues. First of all, let me give you the classical definition of Masonry, because the Masons obviously themselves do have a definition that they give the public for public consumption. And this is basically it. Masonry, we are told, is a system of morality, veil, and allegory. Now, doesn't that help a whole lot? We can just all go home now, you know? We all know everything we need to know about the Masons. Well, that's the way they would like it, unless, of course, you join. But actually, there's a lot more to it than that. Let me give you my definition. I define Masonry as the world's oldest secret fraternal organization, a system of 3 ritual initiations or degrees based on the medieval stonemasons guilds, guarded by blood oaths and founded on the principles of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. Masonry symbolism is a blend of Old Testament symbols rooted in the building of King Solomon's temple and ancient mystery religions. Now, you heard in the introduction about all these different degrees and things that I have been through, but in reality, most Masons will tell you that in fact there is only classical Blue Lodge Masonry, that is in fact the core of all Masonry. Now, Blue Lodge Masonry refers to the first foundational 3 degrees of Masonry: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. Now, indeed, Masonry has become universal. It's in virtually every country of the world, even now I believe in Russia. And just to illustrate this briefly, this is
Just as an aside, the King James only guys, they believe that the Freemasons had a lot to do with like the reinterpretation of the Bible. I don't know how true that is, but just to kind of show that there's this idea that the Freemasons are kind of the hands that's rocked the cradle for forever and a day.
Which reinterpretation?
Like all of them, like from pretty much anything after 1881, like when Westcott and Hort did their methodology of Bible translations. So
I mean, it checks out when you follow the language. I mean, because if this, like, because Freemasons, all their stuff is based off, like he said, King Solomon. Solomon was into witchcraft. I mean, you got the seals of Solomon, and like, so he was into all that.
Well, that's their lore. I don't know. I think that's the important thing to point out is that's what they say. It's like part of their lore. I don't know if it's true or not. You know, who knows? Yeah. But that's kind of like their thing is they claim they're from the tradition of Solomon and stuff, which he gets into in a little bit here.
But I wanted to say, so, like, but I think the base behind witchcraft is spellcraft. Mm-hmm. Like you're making spells, right?
Yeah.
So it's words.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they would be the ones, the hand behind changing or interpreting the translations of the Bible.
Well, I think what happened is it was a stone guild, kind of like a regular builder's guild for forever. And then the Illuminati, like the guys out of the French Revolution, took it over. And then it got into like the weird cult stuff, which is all born out of the French Revolution and the cult of reason and all that stuff. Like they had this goddess of light, like enlightenment, which is probably really the devil, but you know. So anyway, yeah, that kind of stuff. And so I think it got more cultic after, was it 1789? There's a really interesting book that I haven't read, but I've been meaning to. It's called Proof of a Conspiracy. Let's see if I can actually Google it. But it's actually a book that was sent to George Washington. A conspiracy book. I'll just do Freemasonry. Because it's not going to show it to me unless I get super specific. So, oh, you little turds. This is this it? Proofs of a conspiracy against all the religions and governments of Europe. Carried on in the secret of the Freemasons.
The 4th edition, so it's been edited 4 times.
Yeah, this is a newer version. obviously. But this book, Proof of a Conspiracy, I guess it was John.
How
I
much
guess
have
it
they
was
taken out of
John
that?
Robinson. Let's see if this is the same guy. Come on, man. You're killing me.
Come on, man! I got hairy legs. I'm the president.
Come on, man. All right. I'm pretty sure this is right. Let me just Google it, make sure that I'm getting the right author. Okay, so did John Robinson send I don't know, I'm probably missing George Washington a book called Proof, not Prof, of a Conspiracy.
Professor of a conspiracy.
Yeah, I know.
Good dog.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I knew that wasn't right. Yeah, here we go. All right. So, yes, I've actually read this. So, yeah, so it was from George W. Snyder in 1798. He sent this book to George Washington.
Probably Rob Snyder's great grandpa.
I highly doubt it, but yeah, maybe.
Oh, Rob Snyder's based. I bet it's
He is based. That's true. Okay. So this is what he wrote with regards to the letter. Sir, you will, I hope, not think it is a presumption in a stranger whose name perhaps never reached your ears to address himself to you, the commanding general of a great nation. I am a German born and liberally educated in the city of Heidelberg. Came to this country in 1776. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Let's see. All right, here we go. It was some time since that a book fell into my hands entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy by John Robinson. Okay, so this was actually... So John Robinson did write it, but this George Snyder sent it to Washington. And the reason he sent it to Washington was because Washington had been a Freemason, but it was kind of like he had to join it to be part of the British Army. And to summarize it, he kind of thought they were lame, so he quit going. But they still kind of, but once he became president, the Freemasons were like, "Hey, he's our guy."
That's our guy.
Yeah,
he used to be tight with him.
Yeah, and Washington's like, "Oh man," so that's why he got this book. So that's why he got this book, and let's see if we can finish this up here. It was some time since that a book fell into my hands entitled Proofs of a Conspiracy, etc. by John Robinson, which gives a full account of a society of Freemasons that distinguishes itself by the name of Illuminati. So this was a subgroup of the Freemasons, whose plan is to overturn all government and all religion, even natural, and to endeavor to eradicate every idea of a supreme being, and distinguish man from beast by his shape only. A thought suggested itself to me that some of the lodges in the United States might have caught the infection and might cooperate with the Illuminati or the Jacobin Club in France. Fauché is mentioned by Robinson as a zealous member, and who can doubt of Genet and Adet, I'm going to say Adet, even though I'm sure that's not right, have not these their confidence in this country. They use the same expressions and are generally men of no religion.
Wait, are you saying there was an Italian guy named Fauci in this letter?
It might be Fauci. I think it's French, though. I don't think it's Italian.
Yeah, they're pretty close.
Yeah, it's Fauché, because generally with French, you don't pronounce the end consonant, but I could be getting that wrong. Who knows?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're good. So it was Genet, and then I'm going to say Aide or Aide? I don't know. I'm not French. So have not these their confidence in this country. And they use the same expressions and are generally men of no religion. Upon serious reflection, I was led to think that it might be within your power to prevent the horrid plan from corrupting the brethren of the English lodge over which you preside. So the Illuminati was taking over the Freemasons in France, and he was trying to get Washington to prevent them from doing that.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard that story.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts, right? So
yeah.
I just gave that book to Greg to read. I haven't read it myself, but yeah, I have the book.
I mean, wouldn't you think, though, like, it would... with a basis in nihilism, aren't you self-eradicating your group?
Yeah, I guess.
So like basically they took it over and then threw it in the trash can because they're nihilists.
Yeah, well, there's always been this kind of, I think when it comes to history, you have to understand that there were some people that were really mad that feudalism got destroyed, because the whole theological monarchy and stuff, like, that was basically the way they had continued on with feudalism. And once that died and it became apparent that freedom or democracies, republics, whatever you want to call them, they were going to start becoming the popular form of government. Mm-hmm. These old aristocratic types, I think, got upset, and really
what about me?
Yeah, but what about me? Because they don't want other people to prosper. That Jones puts it really good. They just want to rule over a pile of ashes. And so it's, it doesn't matter what condition the world's in as long as they're the best.
Yeah.
And so what essentially happened is they blamed the King James Bible, or what they called the paper pope. And so there were a lot of attempts.
They're mad that there's not
yeah.
They're mad that there's not a stand-in Jesus that's full of shit.
Yeah, because that's like how you consolidate power, right? It's like, we can't control these people if they can read their own book. This is crap. Right. That was exactly what it was. And so there were these variety of different kinds of attempts to basically undermine the King James Bible, because it had brought about the Protestant Reformation. In some sense, it had brought about the Enlightenment. And ultimately, it was what killed the theocratic monarchy. Mm-hmm. So, because, there was the Great Awakening that preceded the American Revolution. That's connected to the American Revolution. And so they basically blamed the Bible for destroying the monarchy and feudalism. So what's happening is when you get to like the time of the French Revolution and kind of into the 1800s, is you get these different attempts to try to reestablish feudalism. That eventually ends up becoming communism, but, it took like 100 years for that to actually develop. But you're seeing kind of the birth of that with the Illuminati and stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's like all these varying attempts to basically destroy, Republican government. So, and the Freemasons preceded that, but the Illuminati apparently got in there and took it over, but it didn't do them a lot of good. And I don't know what's going to get covered in this video and what's not, but something happened. I don't remember which, but something happened that caused a real nasty backlash towards the Freemasons in the 1800s, at least in America. Mm-hmm. And so I think that might be one thing. Of course, I don't know how big Freemasonry stayed in Europe, but in America, it got rejected until Alfred Pike, which is much, much, much later. So, and that's when the weird occult stuff kicks in.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm ranting randomly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. It's and that's kind of why people blame Freemasonry for everything, because it's kind of tied into this.
Yeah. And they got worse groups that tried to take it over, and it made it look even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. All right, let's see.
Fascinating.
All right, let's see what Schneblin has to say.
Stamp that someone just gave me from New Caledonia. I'm not entirely sure where New Caledonia is, but it's evidently somewhere where they speak French. And if you look up there, you'll see that it says the 125th anniversary of the presence of Freemasonry in this country. And you'll notice many Masonic symbols on there. The one that I want to draw your attention to, though, here is the square and compasses of Masonry. And, of course, inside of it, though, instead of the usual letter G that we're accustomed to, we have a bright red pentagram. That's going to be very important later. Ooh. Now, what needs to be understood is that in the United States, all the Grand Lodges that function here come from the Grand Lodge of England originally. But yet, after the American Revolution, it was determined that each state would have its own autonomous Grand Lodge. So every state is more or less its own jurisdiction. And so here, for example, you would have the Grand Lodge of Indiana. Now, the fundamental structure of Freemasonry is rather complex once you get past those first 3 degrees. You'll see here that you have 2 basic stair steps once you get past the Blue Lodge, which is down here. This represents the 3 degrees I just showed you. Then beyond that, you have, this is the Scottish Rite here, and this is the York Rite over here. Those are the two major paths that the Mason can travel. There are 29 degrees here, and there are 9 degrees here. And then when you get to the top, you can go into what is called the 33rd degree if you're one of the lucky few that get to do that, and that is called the Grand Sovereign Inspector General degree. Additionally, Masonry has what are called auxiliary or adoptive bodies, and those are under the arch. The best known of those is the Shrine. And then you also have things like the youth orders, Desmoulins and Rainbow, Tall Cedars of Lebanon, Daughters of the Nile, and so on. And now all of these together make up what is traditionally thought to be classical American Masonry. Now, suppose you wanted to be a Mason. This is something I'm not recommending, of course, but if you do, some of you may have seen the bumper stickers that say, to be one, ask one. The tradition is that you have to ask a Mason. Masons do not do active recruiting, but yet on the other hand, they are today because frankly, Masonry is losing members fast. Now I wish I could tell you this is because there was a mighty revival sweeping America and that Masons everywhere were just falling on their faces and repenting before God. And to a certain extent that is happening, praise God. But I think it's more due to cable TV, a little more mundane reason. Because frankly, there are better things most people have to do today than sit in a lodge room somewhere, and unless there's some compelling either political or social or economic reason why you want to be a Mason, you're probably not going to bother with it because, quite frankly, a lot of it is rather boring. And
okay, with that, we're going to skip ahead to, let's see, I have timestamps, but I didn't label what they were for. So let's go here.
to turn our backs on the old paganism that we used to be a part of, even if we were just regular old heathens, you know, even if you weren't part of some weird cult like I was. So what happens is that God oriented his temple the other way. And that really smote me in my heart when I read that passage. Now, let's talk about how Masonry got started. Its origins are basically shrouded in the mists of time. Masons claim that their first Mason was in fact Nimrod. Now, you know, if I was a Mason, I would not brag about the first Mason being Nimrod. But as that most people understand, he's the person that helped build the Tower of Babel, and it is from Nimrod.
Nimrod? I don't think he meant builder when he said that. So
no.
That basically
Mushroom says fungus. I don't know if he means we're high or if he likes fungus, but either way, welcome to the chat. So.
We're not there yet, but we'll get there, buddy. Hang in there. Freemasons are like fungus.
Okay, then you'll notice after that we see the Egyptian mysteries of Isis and Osiris. And then we have King Solomon and the building of his temple. And there's a character in there that's going to be very important later called Hiram the widow's son. Then in Greece, we have the rites of Eleusis. Now that was the mystery religion, the predominant mystery religion in the days of Greece. And what a mystery religion is unlike your church, okay? Your church, I'm sure anybody can walk in, right? You know, it's not like they have to have a secret handshake to get into your church, do they? If they do, you better talk to me after, okay? Anyway, on the other hand, if you were in a mystery religion, that would only be open to initiates. The best known modern example of a mystery religion other than Masonry would be Temple Mormonism. Because while anybody can walk into a Mormon church, nobody can walk into the depths of a Mormon temple unless they have a special card called a Temple Recommend. Okay, so that was a mystery religion. It involved a mystery, and you had to go through secret initiatic rites and ordeals in order to be a part of the rites of Eleusis. Then beyond that, there was a group called the Dionysian Artificers. Now, artificer is just a fancy name for builders. And these folks were architects and masons who worshiped the god Dionysus, who is the Roman, or actually the Greek god of wine and orgies. Then we have the Kabbalah, which came around about the 5th century BC. It's Jewish mysticism. And then we have Gnosticism, which is Grecian mysticism. And all of these things all contributed to what today we have in modern day Masonry. Then during the medieval period, we have a different group that came along around the year 1000 called the Hashishim. And this was the world's first real modern-day cult, relatively speaking, and secret society. And I talk at great length about the Hashishim in my other video. I don't have time really to go into it now. Suffice it to say that the name is both where we get the word hashish and also where we get the word for assassin. If you look carefully, you can see the word assassin in there. Then after that, along came the Knights Templar. Now, the Knights Templar were a Catholic order of knighthood. And they went over to the Holy Land, and of course the Hashishim were over there in the Middle East, and so they kind of swapped initiations and information and all that, and the Knights Templar brought them back to America. About the same time that same information got into the Stonemasons Guild. And that's why today, if you look at the great cathedrals of Europe, you will see that many of those cathedrals have pagan symbols on them, even though they were built by the Roman Catholic Church. And that's because the stonemasons who built those cathedrals were actually concealing Masonic mysteries in all of those gargoyles and caryatids and demons and unicorns and everything that you see all over those cathedrals. Then finally we have the Brothers of the Rosy Cross, also known today as the Rosicrucians. They were the inheritors of the secrets of the rites of the Templars. And what's interesting is the first recorded printed use of the word Mason in the history of the English language involves the Rosicrucians. It's from a poem called Muse's Threnody, which is written by a guy named Anderson. And this is the passage. It says, "For we be brethren of the Rosy Cross, and we have the Mason word and second sight." Okay, now.
All right, so on that pleasant note, we're going to move on to why the Masons were so popular. The short answer is networking. But I wanted to, there's actually, we're going to stay here for a few minutes because there's actually a very interesting theory he has about how far the networking would go. So I wanted to explore that.
Yeah. Most of you
do not give
contemporary.
Me a, right.
Let's say your boss is a Mason. Let's say that you're up for a promotion and the guy that's competing with you for that promotion is a Freemason. Who do you think is going to get that job? I'll give you a clue. It ain't going to be you. Another thing that Masons do is they use the lodge to network. And this is especially the case with doctors and lawyers. Because doctors and lawyers, it used to be, their codes of ethics would not allow them to advertise. I know all of you are probably sick of seeing commercials for lawyers now. But, you know, back in my day, when I was, say, maybe 20, 25 years old, lawyers were not allowed to advertise. And so the only way they could advertise was through the lodge or through similar fraternal organizations. They would develop networks, and that's how they would get referrals. So then we have the whole thing of discounts. I've already alluded to that, for example, you can walk into a store, and if you're a Mason, you say certain little funny words, and they'll give you a discount. And then, of course, the question becomes, how many large corporations are being run today by Masons? Many, many of them. Just one example. How many of you know that Dave Thomas, the guy that owns Wendy's, he's a 33rd degree Mason? Might want to rethink where you buy your hamburgers. Anyway, and it's a shame because I always kind of like that guy. Anyhow, then we've got the
You didn't miss much except the guy who started Wendy's, Dave Thompson. He was a Freemason apparently. So just to ruin somebody's day. I can't hear you.
My bad. So you know how Wendy's has square burgers?
Yeah.
Squaring the circle?
Illuminati confirmed.
Uh-huh.
lodge and the law. This is even getting more sinister here, folks. Because of what I just mentioned, this whole issue of how lawyers used to build clients, there's always been a close association between the lodge and the law. Large numbers of lawyers and judges are Masons. In fact, in the old days, almost all lawyers were Masons. That's a little bit less true today, but especially obviously if you're a female lawyer, you're not a Mason. But many judges and many lawyers are Masons. Additionally, throughout Europe and America, a disproportionate number of law enforcement people are Masons. In London, it was essentially required that one be a Mason to advance in Scotland Yard or the Metropolitan Police. Untold hundreds of sheriffs in this country and police chiefs are Masons. J. Edgar Hoover, for example, was a 33rd degree Mason. This left a solid Masonic stamp on the FBI, which persists to this day. Now, all of this sounds only vaguely disturbing, but for one thing, and that is the content of the oaths that are given in Masonry. For example, when you take the 3rd degree oath of a Master Mason, one of the codicils in that oath says that you will warn a brother Master Mason of approaching danger so that he can get out of the way. Now let's say you're in the prosecuting attorney's office, or let's say you're a police officer and you learn that a brother Master Mason is going to have a warrant served on him for his arrest. You're obligated by an oath to go and warn that Mason so he can skip town before he's thrown in the clink. Another thing is that you will notice in the 3rd degree oath that you swear that you will keep the secrets of a Master Mason inviolate within your heart, murder and treason excepted. That means any crime except murder and treason, you are obligated by that blood oath to cover. If he's a rapist, if he's a child molester, if he's a thief, if he's an arsonist, any of that stuff, you have to conceal that. You are not allowed to talk about that. And that's true even if you're an officer of the court. Now it gets even worse. Let's say you're a 7th degree Royal Arch Mason in New York Rite. Then the oath is that you have to keep the secrets of a Royal Arch companion inviolate within your heart, murder and treason not accepted. In other words, you've got to keep everything secret. That guy could be an axe murderer. He could be a traitor to the United States like the esteemed Mason Benedict Arnold was. And the Masons would not be able to reveal that. This is pretty serious stuff. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of this. In many communities, especially in the South, try to bring a case against a Mason. You will not get very far, even in the so-called Bible Belt. True story, the boys and the juvenile court judge. There was a juvenile court judge in the Pacific Northwest who had a predilection for little boys. And basically, he presided over a lot of these juvenile delinquent type hearings, and many times, if he liked the boy would get off in exchange for meeting with the judge in chambers and exchanging certain favors, shall we say. Well, this fellow, they kept trying to bust him, and because he was surrounded by Masons, both in the courts and in the law enforcement, they would always cover up for him. Finally, one of the boys went and tattled to the newspaper, and fortunately, the fellow who was the reporter was not a Mason. The story got out. The fellow apparently killed himself, but broken rocks were found in his pocket. Talk more about those broken rocks later. Another true story. There was a financial scam artist in London, and basically he was bilking all sorts of people out of money. And there was a Scotland Yard officer who was trying to nail this guy, and they couldn't get him, and they couldn't get him because the Masons in the yard and the Masons that were surrounding him were protecting him. Finally, the guy did manage to find enough evidence to convict the fellow, but guess what happened to the Scotland Yard official? He was almost busted the meter maid. And they kept giving him the worst possible assignments, and finally the fellow actually had to resign. Then there's the case of the woman who was married to a Shriner. It was his second marriage. He was considerably older than she. She was a young, attractive woman. And he was a member of a very elite shrine organization called the Jesters. If you know anybody who's a jester, be afraid. These are very creepy people. And what would happen in this particular woman's case, and I know it's not isolated because of some of the documents I have seen, every Friday night they would have poker. And he would tie his wife up on the bed, and all the other jesters would rape her. And there was nothing she could do about it. She went to the local police chief, and he was a Shriner. She went to the district attorney, and he was a Shriner. And finally, she was about to go higher than that, and a psychiatrist came to her and said, if you say one more word, we're going to have you locked up as a paranoid delusional because I'm also a Mason. and you'll be locked up forever on my signature and you'll never get out. She ended up having to flee the state. These are examples of how Masons can cause a miscarriage of justice. But here is probably the most celebrated example of this in the history of the West. Jack the Ripper, a Freemason? The answer to that question is yes, one way or another. Let me explain. For those of you that may not know, Jack the Ripper is probably
there's a story
the
coming
Western
for
world's
that.
first known serial killer. He murdered 8 prostitutes in Whitechapel district of London in the year 1888, and he had the whole city of London terrified. This was Victorian England, mind you, and nothing like this had ever happened in the history of England that anybody knew of. And here's what happened. They mounted a huge investigation. The man in charge of the investigation was Police Commissioner Warren, who was a Freemason. At that time, the Prime Minister of England, as is often the case, was a Freemason. The heir presumptive to the throne of England, the Duke of Clarence, was also a Mason. And the physician to the royal court at the time, Dr. Gull, was a Freemason. Now, here's what actually happened. The 8 women who were killed, if you study this, and I happen to have been, before I even became a Mason, I was kind of a Jack the Ripper buff. I'd read several of his the books about him and kind of studied up. And when I became a Mason, I realized that the horrible way these unfortunate women were murdered was in accord with Masonic ritual gestures. Just one of them had her throat cut from ear to ear, another one had her bowels ripped out of her body and thrown over her left shoulder, and so on and so on. These were Masonic ritual murders. But why? Well, here's what happened. Believe it or not, the Duke of Clarence, who was second in line to the throne of England, had fallen in love with a prostitute named Annie Crooks. And he married this woman. Now, that was bad enough. But he had a child by her, a little girl. And this woman, horror of horrors, was a Roman Catholic. Now, if you understand the way the Parliament and the monarchy work in England, there is a law that no member of the royal family can ever marry a Roman Catholic because of the adversarial relationship that existed for centuries between the Church of Rome and the Church of England. And so this was this would have shaken the very foundations of the throne of England.
Yeah.
So Dr. Gull, who was a physician and surgeon, had Annie Crooks committed to a mental institution where she died by suicide several months later, because of course in those days mental hospitals were not really Club Med, not that they are today either. The little girl, who was 2 or 3 at most, was placed in a Catholic orphanage. But every woman in Whitechapel, from Catherine Beddoes to Mary Jane Kelly, that knew of the wedding and knew Annie Crooks, were horribly murdered to conceal the secrets of a brother master Mason. Now, you'll notice the thing.
So, there's that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a mess.
Mm-hmm. So
I got to give you one here. So going over the oaths.
Yeah.
I got to give you one. Your boy Paul.
Go
he
for
said
it.
to never take oaths.
I believe Christ said the same thing. Oaths are not a good thing.
Based.
Yep. So we're going to call it good there. I had 3 other sound bites, but I think we'll go ahead and pause on that because we're about 50 minutes in. If you all are interested in this topic and you'd like us to go over it further, because we've just scratched the surface, this is a rabbit hole.
No, just barely.
Yeah, so if you guys want us to go over it further, let us know. And if it bored the snot out of you, let us know and we won't talk about it again.
If it bored the snot out of you, then you're not here.
Yeah, then you're not here. So I guess we don't worry about it. No, I mean, I guess the point is, it's like, it's when they talk about this conspiracy theory stuff, it's really just good old boys clubs. It's networking.
Yeah.
People in fraternities and these kinds of, I knew Sister's Bob's cousin and he's part of this club or whatever. And that's what pushes a lot of this stuff. And that's basically what's going on here, only, mix a little bit of the occult in and you've got it. I think next time, if we do go over this again, we'll talk about Alfred Pike, because Alfred Pike, he was the guy that started a lot of the occult stuff in Freemasonry. Yeah, he actually gave it a revival in the late 1800s, because yeah, the American population rejected it for a time.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Alfred Pike brought it back. So we
I
might
feel
go
like
over
that should tie in with like pre-FBI, CIA kind of stuff. Because the KKK, Albert Pike was the
Yeah,
he
he
was
also
the Grand
founded
Wizard
the
of the KKK.
Yeah,
so
he was a
and
Freemason.
that's a
Grand
CIA
Wizard. Yep.
program. So
Is it a CIA program? I didn't know that.
I believe so. I mean, it's like the same kind of people, you know.
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
the Fed started
carpetbaggers
it.
and the CIA is like the same
Yeah.
thing.
Well, we'll look into that next time. I think that'd be interesting. So,
Yeah.
Alfred Pike is apparently a notorious dude. So I
Yeah,
learned in
very.
this research. So
I feel like Joe Biden said something about liking him.
I think it was Bird. It was Bird, the guy that was a Grand Wizard of the
Yeah,
KKK,
you're right, you're
and
right.
it was something Bird. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
So that's all right. But yeah, point is, fraternities are not a good thing.
No, sir.
Didn't like him in college, and apparently people don't want to leave college any more than want to leave high school, I guess. I don't
Right?
know.
Everybody just wants to be the specialist boy in the group.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know?
All right, well, we're going to move on. This is going to be the end of episode 1. So if you are watching on the live stream, stay tuned. We got episode 2 coming up. And if you're watching this after the fact, guys, thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you next time. All right, so that's the end of episode 1. So now we are moving on to Fungus. So do you want to lead us in, Mr. Cody?
Sure. All right. Welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore. We're the Tri-F podcast where we try not to F the podcast up. Today we're talking about parasites and fungus. They're kind of synonymous. I think we're going to focus mainly on parasites. What they do, who they are, what they're connected to, how to get rid of them. So if we make it through all this stuff, it'll be a good episode.
Sweet.
Gary, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm actually in a good mood today. I'm feeling on
Good, me
cloud
too.
9. All
Yeah.
right. Okay, so we've got a movie or video coming up here.
Yeah, it's pretty long, so I think I don't know how. It just depends on how interesting it is, I guess. I watched it
Okay.
earlier, but if you start at like 3 minutes, they kind of have some technical difficulties.
Start at 3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah,
You got to love technical difficulties. You
yeah.
have to
I
empathize.
mean, it's kind of an old video. It's like in a library and shit.
Yeah. All right.
But now experts in the field think they're
Okay. So this is good. We're at 3:33. Okay.
Sure.
much,
Illuminati
much
confirmed.
more
Illuminati confirmed.
common than realized. And these organisms typically invade an animal, and they can do all kinds of things. For example, they can tinker with the neurocircuits of their host. Sometimes they change the hormone levels or levels of neurochemicals. They've got a whole bunch of different tactics that allow them to basically make the host behave the way they want it to. And then the second part of my book, I look at the flip side to this, which is how humans and other animals protect themselves from parasites. And we have evolved a complex series of behavioral adaptations that kick in the moment we feel like we're at threat of becoming sick. And just a few examples would be, for example, if an animal is injured, like cat.
I prefer to say that we were designed with defenses against such creatures, but designed, evolved. We don't need to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, evolved is kind of a better term because it goes based off of location. Like if you go to Africa, there's different parasites over there that are going to attack you, right? So,
Well, yeah, that'll be
It is-
adaptation.
it is-
but adaptation's a design feature.
okay,
Yeah,
semantics,
yeah.
Cats or primates and so on, what are the things they'll do is they will lick their wound. And the reason they do that is because saliva is rich in antimicrobial compounds. And animals across nature almost routinely shun their feces. We are not alone. Feces are, filled with all kinds of nasty of pathogens that could harm us. And similarly, animals shun their feces. So these are some of the kinds of behaviors we'll be talking about tonight.
Apparently she's never seen a pig or a cow or any sort of barnyard animal.
Did she say sun?
They shun their feces.
Oh. Well, yeah, I mean, you got to think about which animals have more parasites, though.
Pigs, I thought, were pretty notorious for having parasites.
Yeah, they have tons of them.
That's what I thought. So they roll in their own crap all the time.
Right. You
Maybe
said shun. Shun is get rid of.
Well, I thought shun would mean stay away, like stay away from. Like cows and pigs will like roll in their own crap.
Yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a long video, so I don't know if we'll get through it, but I mean, it does talk about how parasites will affect the animal's mind to breed more parasites, right? So like pigs being so infected with parasites, like their brains are wired by the parasites
to roll
in the shit so that they make more
I
parasites.
see. I see. That's interesting.
So kind of like she talks about, it's at like 5:50, I think she starts talking about the cat. I lost it.
Oh, the cat one? All right.
Yeah,
so,
where the rats seek out the cat.
Gotcha. That's at 5:50?
At 5:50.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting topics to write about. I came across an article about a parasite, a one-celled protozoan that invades the brain of rats.
Toxoplasmosis,
And
that's what it's called.
Turns
Toxoplasmosis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe Rogan has talked about it a few times.
Gotcha.
its innate fear of cats into an attraction. And when I say attraction, I mean sexual attraction. The rodents become sexually aroused by the scent of cat urine.
That's a very bad thing for a mouse to be.
Yes. And what I learned is, needless to say, that the rat soon ends up in the belly of a cat, which of course is very convenient for the cat. But I was also stunned to learn it was very convenient for the parasite because the feline gut is the only place where this parasite can sexually reproduce.
That's crazy.
And when I continued reading,
I wonder why. Like, why the feline gut?
I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I learned that about 30% of people around the world have this parasite in their brains. The vast majority of them completely ignorant of the fact. And that some scientists were concerned that it might actually be altering our behavior too. So I called up a neuroscientist at Stanford who was mentioned in the article, and I asked him about this. And he said, you know, I think there could be something to this, and you really should speak to this scientist in Prague, a biologist. Give him a call. He's a bit of a wild man, but I think it will be worth your time to talk to. This is Jaroslav Flager.
He looks like a wild man.
Yeah. And when I talked to Jaroslav, he proceeded to tell me, I think, the single wildest story I have ever heard over the span of my career. He told me that he has this parasite in his brain and that he's convinced it's the reason he has a sort of a reckless streak about him. And I said, well, you know, what makes you think this? How did you come to this conclusion? Thinking, he's got to be.
Are we sure that's a cat parasite? My money is between a demon or a bolt of lightning. I'm not sure.
Well, I kind of think that all parasites are demons.
I think there's a Jewish theory about that.
Is there?
Like, I think so. Like, there was an ancient, maybe it's not Jewish, but there was an ancient idea that, like, what we would call bacteria and parasites today were considered demons.
Yeah.
Way back
See,
then.
I kind of think, like, getting into the demonology, and there's, like, hierarchies of demons. It's like you have single-celled protozoans, and you have complex organisms, and you have, like, the big parasites. Like, there's a hierarchy structure within parasites themselves, just like there is in the demon realm.
Well,
which
there's a
is
hierarchy in most
kinda
things.
crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I kind of think like the toxoplasmosis parasite could be like a specific, like the lust demon, for example.
Mhm.
Like I mean, they clearly show that within rats because it's sexually attracted to the smell of cat urine. So it's like if we have that, is it still a lust demon? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I guess, are you lusting after cats?
I'm not lusting after cats currently, no.
Just in case the cats need to stay in the road where they belong, as Brad Stein said. So,
But yeah, I think there could be a hierarchy. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It could
well,
match up.
I think the hierarchy could also be explained by a designer. You know, like lots of things have hierarchies in nature. So
The designer of the parasites?
of the universe, you know, like bees have a hierarchy. We kind of have a hierarchy. Lions have a hierarchy. You know,
Yeah.
it depends on what you mean by hierarchy. Like the thing about a lot of this stuff, though. Like
Well,
we
I'm
were
talking about like you have like demons that are in control of other demons. Like we went through this whole thing.
yeah. Like a ranking system, like a tier
right,
system.
a ranking
yeah.
system.
And a lot of things have that. I just, I don't know if the ranking system is enough to say that they're like I guess let me ask you this: Are you saying that demons and parasites are the same thing, or are they running
Yes.
parallel with each other?
No, I think they're the same thing.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I agree with you there, but we can keep watching if you want. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there might be a cat demon. So, I don't know. Let's see. Come
Be a
on.
real kook. And he told me how he had, for years, since his early 20s, he just noticed that he was very strange. Like he would walk out into the middle of dense traffic, and if a car honked on him, he wouldn't jump out of the way. At the time, Czechoslovakia was under Soviet domination. He made no effort to disguise his hatred of the regime. He said, I don't even know how I didn't end up in jail. And something else that really concerned him was once on a visit to Turkey, he got caught in the middle of a gun battle between the Turks and the Turkish government and the Kurds. And he immediately took cover, but as bullets are whistling overhead, he kept thinking, why am I not afraid? What is wrong with me? So move forward a decade or so, and I think it was around in his early 40s.
Could it be that you lived in Soviet Europe? Like maybe you had a death wish?
Just a little desensitized.
Yeah, it's like, I think that's called being dead inside, sir. So,
Yeah, could be.
good night.
A colleague.
Tell you one thing though, this dude needs to eat. You can see his skull. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he lives in Soviet Russia.
oh, there you go. Yeah, that would
There
do
you
it.
go.
Breadlines, they are a good thing. But anyway.
Asked him if he would participate in a clinical trial because he was having trouble rounding up enough subjects. And this colleague was trying to develop an improved test for Toxoplasma gondii, which is the name of this parasite I just told you about. So Yaroslav agreed to participate, and he shortly found out that indeed he had the parasite. He had heard a little bit about parasitic manipulators, in fact, from your boss, Richard Dawkins, a famous evolutionary biologist, because a decade or two earlier,
I would consider anything that man says suspect, just so you know. So,
Which is fair.
yeah.
Dawkins had briefly mentioned parasitic manipulators in one of his books, and it made a huge impression on Yaroslav. So he thought, when he found out that he had this parasite, he thought, maybe this parasite is manipulating my brain too. And then he did a lot of reading, and he discovered that, how the parasite, there were signs that maybe it might be manipulating cats. So he launched some of the first studies of humans. And he found lots of strange differences between people who were infected and people who weren't. So people who were infected had slightly slower reaction times. They were a little bit more easily distracted. He conducted some studies and discovered that they were more likely to be in car accidents, like about 2.7 times more likely to be in car accidents.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and then a few other groups have since reproduced that finding. Groups in other countries, they've also found that people who test positive for the parasite are more likely to be in car crashes. And then,
Can I say that's probably because of nutrient deprivation? Because
yeah, probably,
it's
but I mean
it
that's
doesn't
still
mean they're manipulating your brain. It means they're eating your food, so you're tired. It's not the same thing as
yeah.
hacking your brain. It's like, well, of course your response time is slower. You're dying.
Sure.
Congratulations.
yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like,
Yeah, I'll give you that.
yeah.
both Yaroslav and other groups have also connected the parasite to a number of mental disorders. So, for example, people who test positive for the parasite are at slightly increased risk of suffering from schizophrenia or having bipolar disorder. They're also at increased risk of committing suicide or attempting to.
Sorry. Now, here's an interesting idea. What if it is parasites and nutrient deprivation that's causing things like mental disorders? Because the chemical brain theory is kind of going out the window as time goes on. Like, I think we still, believe in like dopamine and stuff, but it's been proven here recently.
Well, they don't measure it. If you go to a psychiatrist and be like, "Hey, I need help. I'm depressed, blah blah blah."
Yeah,
They don't measure your brain chemicals to give you before they give you medication. They just give you medication.
Right. And those medications have been proven to not work. Like that was the state. Yeah, that whole theory has been proven to be garbage. So I mean, I think there is some merit
Lilly,
to
is
it.
that guy's name?
I don't know the guy's
It was
name.
Eli Lilly that got that chemical imbalance bullshit pushed in the 80s.
Was that him? Okay. I know Michael Knowles. I was listening to Michael Knowles, and he said that there's a study that came out recently that refuted all that chemical imbalance garbage.
Good.
But
so Jerry Marzinski's getting the word out.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is there has to be some truth to it because, like, meth withdrawal and schizophrenia are very similar in terms of their symptoms. And it's because meth essentially like floods the brain of dopamine, of a artificial version of dopamine, and your brain quits making it. So it's a very extreme version of that. But to sit there and like the full scope of what they were talking about with the chemical balance theory was crap. Like I guess maybe specifically the link to depression or whatever, perhaps. But I'd have to read the study. I don't remember exactly what was said. I just know there has to be something to it because it is kind of tied to like why drugs are so bad, because they mess with your brain chemistry on that level. Like they artificially flood it, and that's what.
I think a lot of what we're calling brain chemistry comes from the gut, though. Like your gut is your mind.
I keep hearing that. I don't know to what extent that's true, and I don't know.
Dude, if I eat a big giant bowl of ice cream and then get on this podcast, I'll be worthless. Facts. I'll just be like, I don't know.
Be lethargic and full of brain fog. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think it has a lot to do with toxins, though. Like our body is not processing the toxins and stuff, like all the fake crap.
But the more toxins are in your body, the more hospitable it is for a foreign entity to live in.
Mm-hmm. That's true, like weakened immune system and stuff.
Yeah. And then they start telling you that you want sugar, and then your decisions are based on the parasites' decisions. Like if you want, like, do I want ice cream or do I want a steak?
Yeah.
Like your intrusive thoughts, for lack of a better word, are going to be like ice cream, bruh.
Mm-hmm.
And that's parasites. That you're letting your parasites make your decisions.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say on that, like I don't disagree with you, but when I was dieting and lost a bunch of weight, one of the things I did learn was a lot of times your brain will trick you into thinking that you want a particular food when it's really wanting like a macro. So, for example, if you're like craving pizza really bad, you might not need pizza, but you'll need like a carb, you know?
Sure.
So like some bread or, you know, vegetable or, you know, whatever, something with carbs in it. That'll actually curtail the food craving if you actually give the macro that your body needs. So rather
Makes
than
sense.
like eating the specific food. So that was something that I learned that helped me with my issues.
Yeah. But the deceiver tells you that you want something else.
Well, in this case, the deceiver is the FDA who flooded it with a bunch of chemicals to get you addicted. But anyway, so
no doubt.
Kill themselves. There have been a few very well conducted studies in Europe where they've actually shown that that suicidal behavior increases in direct proportion to the prevalence of the parasite in different countries. I think that was a study involving about 22 or so countries. So the parasite has been, over the years and repeatedly, again and again, connected to various behavioral disturbances. However, I don't want to freak anybody out.
I was going to ask, who has cats? Can you teach proper kitty litter disposal procedure here? Because
Thank
keep
you so
them
much.
outside.
In fact, I didn't even really explain how this parasite gets into our brains. And one of the ways is changing a cat litter box. Other ways include gardening if you don't wash your hands properly afterwards, because the cats basically defecate the parasite, that they shed the eggs of this parasite in their feces.
And also, I mean, I know for pregnant women, they should avoid cat litter for that reason, because it could actually cause serious neurological damage to a child.
That's correct.
Baby.
That's correct. If a woman is exposed to the parasite during pregnancy, it doesn't matter if she was exposed before pregnancy, but if it actually occurs during pregnancy, the parasite can do damage to the baby's nervous system or even trigger a miscarriage. So there's a few ways you can get it. I mentioned, changing cat litter, gardening. If you don't really thoroughly scrub vegetables, there's still dirt particles on it. You can get it that way. Another way you can get the parasite, and in fact it may be a rather common way at that, is by eating undercooked lamb or beef. And the reason for that is because grazing cattle can pick up the eggs, and it then gets incorporated into their flesh, which of course is the meat that we eat. So those are some of the ways that this parasite ends up in our brain. For example, in France, 50% of people are infected with the parasite, and that's probably because they love their meat saignant, literally bleeding.
I saw one statistic where doctors checked.
That's why Jesus says not to eat blood.
Yeah, I hear blood's really quite
Stay away
dangerous.
from the demons. Parasites are demons.
There you go. So does the video talk about how to get rid of the crazy demons or parasites or whatever?
Not to an extent.
Because I see on the tab, it's like garlic, vampires,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's all coming together. So
yeah, so I sent in the chat, there's a video of garlic versus parasites under a microscope. I've got like 5 of those different ones that we can look at. They're pretty interesting. So you know what's going on with your body when you ingest those things, because I think that's good information to have.
Okay. So is there anything in particular anything else you're wanting to watch on this video?
I didn't timestamp anything else, but there is some good stuff there at the end.
At the end, all right.
But I can't exactly say where. So we might just be screwed.
Okay, well, how about we go on to figuring out what happens when we eat garlic?
Okay, sure.
Fight the vampires.
Oh, let's plug that video, though.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So this video is it's in a library, but it's a book exposition, and the book is by Kathleen McAuliffe called Your Brain. This is Your Brain on Parasites. I would highly recommend this book. That's just me.
There you go. And you got the YouTube video is titled Kathleen McAuliffe. MCAULIFFE. This is your brain on parasites, how tiny creatures manipulate our behavior. And end.
And
There's not even an ellipses there. What am I supposed to do with that? Anyway, so the YouTube channel is B&B Books and Books. So you can give that a whirl if you so desire. So let's see. All right, I'm going to have to readjust my window sizes here because these shorts are all off center.
Yep.
So give me a minute to do that. That ain't fair. It's just not fair.
no fear.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, the garlic is very funny, man. I mean, when it comes to like vampires and also iron. I believe they talk about iron.
Okay.
So, in Revelations it says Jesus will rule the world with an iron rod.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Well, I usually assume iron is associated with the weapons and stuff.
Well, parasites don't like iron, and vampires don't like iron.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Funny, right?
Yeah. Turtle Chief just wrote into the chat.
Oh, he did.
Yes, and he says, garlic is a fungus for bread.
Garlic is a fungus for bread? What does that mean?
I take it he's not a fan of garlic. So
That's because he's got parasites, evidently.
and here's the dad joke.
His parasites made him say that.
Yes, it was his parasites. And then he replies, this is our dad joke for the evening. Oh, the irony. And he also says we had garlic bread for dinner. So this is just right on your mind. Illuminati confirmed. So, all right, here we go. Let's watch this short.
All right.
Garlic extract versus human parasites under the microscope. What happens next is unbelievable. Watch closely. I'll be back at the end to explain how this can benefit your health. As you can see, they're starting to die. Garlic proves once again how powerful it is against harmful threats. It also fights bacteria, viruses, inflammation, and even cancer. Add it to your diet in moderation and enjoy the benefits. Garlic extract versus...
Nice.
Well, there you go. Garlic kills parasites.
Yes, sir.
Suck it, Dracula. All right.
What else do we have?
Okay, let's see. The next thing you brought up is something 100 times magnification. Vodka versus parasites. Well, vodka kills everything, vodka. So there we go.
Glug. This one might surprise you. Party time.
Ah!
Yep.
That makes sense. Vodka's sugar, isn't it?
Yep.
So that's why it does that.
Sure is.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like humans kind of do that when they have vodka too.
That's true. Is there a garlic flavored vodka?
Is there a garlic flavored vodka? Huh.
That's
Interesting
That's your
concept.
solution right there.
Yeah. Garlic vodka. Then you won't get parasites from drinking.
There you go. We are not doctors. We are not doctors.
We're about to be, though.
Yeah.
World recognized.
Yeah, right.
We invented
honorary PhD.
Parasite-free vodka.
There we go. There you go, Elon. There's your next project.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, what's next here? We got salt versus parasites.
Be ye the salt of the earth.
All right.
Can salt really kill parasites? Let's dive into this fascinating reaction that's both natural and effective. Parasites, those tiny invaders, rely on moisture to survive. This is where salt comes into action. It's more powerful than you think. Salt absorbs moisture through a process called osmosis. It draws water out of the parasite cells, dehydrating and ultimately killing them. As the water escapes, the parasites lose their structure and die. Salt's natural ability to dehydrate makes it an effective remedy in fighting these microscopic pests. This reaction isn't just for show. Salt is used in preserving food, cleaning, and even as a natural treatment for certain parasites in agriculture and aquaculture. Science meets everyday life. Follow for more fascinating wonders. Can salt really kill parasites?
And now you know why the Fed told you to quit eating salt.
Mm-hmm.
Now you know
No
the
doubt.
truth. It's all lies.
That's why they made table salt basically inedible.
Mm-hmm.
You got to buy that Himalayan salt and all that now.
Yeah, they also got rid of the iodine out of it, just to guarantee that you're an idiot.
Yep.
So you need to get iodine, folks, and I guess Himalayan salt.
Well, any kind of salt that's not regular table salt is,
Yeah.
I mean, better than. I mean, table salt's literally not edible. It's like garbage.
Yeah. You can't pickle with it. You can't do nothing with it, man.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. So.
Get that expensive stuff. Make it last.
Mm-hmm. All right. Guess who wins? Sugar versus human parasites. Well, guys, the parasites are gonna win, but we'll see.
Did you know what happens when sugar is poured onto parasites? Let's explore this fascinating connection. Sugar isn't just a treat for us. It's a feast for parasites, too. Many types of parasites thrive in environments rich in sugar, as it gives them the energy they need to multiply and survive. When sugar enters the body, it can provide the perfect conditions for some parasites to grow, making it harder for the immune system to fight back. But here's the good news. Reducing sugar intake can help starve parasites and support a healthier body. So, the next time you reach for something sweet, remember, you're not just feeding yourself. Stay informed, stay healthy, and take charge of your sugar intake. Science meets everyday life. Follow for more fascinating wonders of science. Do like, comment, share, and subscribe. Did you know what happens when sugar is poured onto parasites?
Hey, shush.
Let's.
I told you to stop.
Nice. Yeah, this guy's great.
Okay, so we got this guy, and then I think that's all the videos you sent. So let's see here.
Sweet.
Alrighty.
The relations between a carnivorous diet and mammalian infections with intestinal protozoa, 1924. They were feeding animals parasites that were live in cysts, and they measured their feces, and they sacrificed them for measuring inside the intestines. Data from the various sources described above seem to prove that a carnivorous diet is unfavorable for the intestinal protozoa of mammals. I've been saying this for 4 years now, that the carnivore diet is the absolute best diet when you're trying to get parasites out of your body with anti-parasitic medications or really good herbal supplements. That study I just showed you is 100 years old, and this is what I like to do, old and new clinical discoveries to improve your health so that you don't have to take drugs. The relations between
so that one actually surprised me.
Oh yeah, that the meat one helped.
But yeah, that you know, I figured like meat would be, parasites would like that in your stomach, but I guess not.
Well, it makes sense. Like they would want carbs and starches and that kind of thing.
They like sugar.
Yeah, like proteins and fats wouldn't be great for them. I wouldn't think so.
I guess your body processes. Your body knows what to do with that stuff, whereas it doesn't know what to do with sugar. So that's what the parasites eat.
Yeah, it's all like used for, specific things. Like fats are slow burning and protein builds up your body, and carbs are for like running and like, you load up on that stuff when you've got things to do. So, if you eat in accordance with what you've got to do, then, you're generally better off. So, everything's got its purpose except parasites, apparently. So, I'm sure they've got a purpose somewhere. I just don't know what it is. But anyway, hijacking wasps or something. So
I looked into that too. That was pretty crazy. I actually watched a guy pull parasites out of a wasp.
Yeah. No,
Pretty
like
nuts.
the murder hornet thing. They pull the big larvae, almost as large as the bug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the freakiest one was it? It's something to do with snails. Like they come out of the caterpillars or something. I don't
know. I didn't watch that one.
Gross.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Parasites are disgusting, and I hate them, and I want them all to die. Because they're demons.
Because they're demons. So, is there anybody who talks about this idea of parasites and demons being the same thing?
I haven't found anybody that really links them together.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, why do you think, other than the hierarchy thing, why do you think that they're the same?
Because I've personally experienced when I eat bad things, I get worse thoughts. Like if you drink a bunch of chocolate milk before bed, you're going to have bad dreams. So I think they very much influence the parasites. When you feed them, they very much influence your thoughts. So, I mean, at least to me, they have when I've, observed.
Well, I'm lactose intolerant, so I wouldn't know, but
Right. But if like you eat a bunch of sugar and then go to sleep and see what happens. I mean, like you'll probably have worse dreams than you normally do.
I don't know. I mean, I don't have that experience. Like, I don't know. Food doesn't really affect my dreams all that much.
Yeah.
I'm just irritable if I go to bed hungry, I guess. So.
Well, is that you being irritable or is that your parasites?
Well, I'd ask the same thing about, is it parasites or is it you, just in general?
Like I think when you get hangry, I think it's your parasites are angry. It's not you. This is like those angry thoughts. Those are intrusive thoughts, right? So where are they coming from?
Well, are your good thoughts parasites?
Are you what?
Are your good thoughts parasites?
I don't think so.
Or are we all driven by bugs or something inside of us? So cells.
I think that's what I'm saying. Like the negative. I get more negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the connection that parasites and demons have is they're both negative. If I eat a lot of sugar, I get negative reactions. Demons are negative. So.
Well, I don't know if I agree. Oh, I don't agree with you, but that is interesting.
I definitely need to work on the theory and connect more dots.
Yeah. Well, I think something to consider is I think a lot of what we are going through today is food companies. Basically, people distilling stuff and making concentrated versions of things. Like, you're not just getting a little sugar from an apple or something when you eat Fruit Loop. You're getting a concentrated burst of that stuff that really your body isn't designed to handle. Mm-hmm. A lot of this is just, it's all basically the food is designed to be addictive. And so they make it with brighter colors, with dyes that are petroleum based, which is RFK's working on banning. They've got, basically stuff that makes it's more palatable. And it's just basically more palatable because it's concentrated with sugar and fats and things that your body can handle in the right amounts. But if it's all super concentrated and stuff, then it's going to make a big difference. And, that's going to make your parasites more active too if you got them. I mean, they're getting steroid-infused sugar. So, you probably got roided up parasites in your bowels. So,
yeah.
Yep. And that is going to affect your mood. That's going to affect your blood sugar. That's going to affect, I don't know exactly the terminology. I'm not a doctor. But, if you've got low blood sugar and you're having to eat and eat and eat and eat to kind of stay regular, let's say, then yeah, your mood swings are going to be harsher, and you're liable to have more bad thoughts and everything like that. So I would argue that a lot of this is due to the extremes, basically because of our processed food. So
Yeah, I would say that.
I think that.
And who does that?
The FDA, the CIA. It's all CIA.
And who are they?
Demons.
Okay. My point has been made.
Illuminati confirmed. All right, man. I think that covers subject 2. Do we want to go on?
Yeah.
Do we want to go on to Wes Huff and Michael Knowles, or do we want to call it a night?
I mean, I don't even know what the name of that channel was that was talking about Wes Huff. So if you want to talk about the thing that you watched, that's cool, but I don't really have.
Well, I haven't watched it, so it'd be a live reaction if we did it.
Yeah.
I think.
Let's just do that.
Okay. All right. We can do it. So we will, give me just a minute here to pull that interview up. I have no idea what they're going to talk about. None whatsoever. So let's see. Michael Knowles, Wes Huff. It's just people seem to like it when we talk about Wes Huff, so we're going to talk about Wes Huff. So, all right. So top 10. Here we go. Here. Oh, wait a minute. I've got to readjust my window because those shorts always.
Shorts.
Yeah, because everything's all jacked up with those shorts, man.
Yep. Got to set it up for pants now.
Yeah, I gotta shut up for pants. Oh my goodness. Come on.
Just filling in for Trevor. That's all.
Yeah.
The dad jokes.
Oh, those are always so painful. They hurt my soul.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's see if I can click on it. The title is Top 10 Bible Lies. Will this center the thing?
And this is the Catholic guy, right? That was arguing with
being a man of integrity. It's probably
Charlie
no
Kirk the other day.
that God put this.
Yes.
I am occasionally.
Yes, it's Michael Knowles, who is the Catholic guy. Charlie Kirk was the Protestant guy.
Okay.
So you are correct, sir. Hang on a minute. My window is not. Come on, don't grab that.
No, it's not.
OBS, why are you so unuser friendly? I would go to StreamYards if I had the money. All right. I think we're going to have to live with this. Okay, here we go. Actually, we need to end this episode. Boy, we're dumb.
Oh.
Yep.
That was a close one.
That was a close one. We almost.
All right.
I don't know what we would have done. All right.
That long ending, folks.
Yeah. Well, if you are still watching on the live stream, we've got one more segment left. If you are watching this after the fact, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Appreciate you.
All right, now on to part 3. We have not watched this at all. No prep whatsoever.
None.
We have not done our homework. We're going to improvise this thing. The title,
Unresearched.
unresearched,
Hopefully that guy,
unprofessional.
That Almond Hillman guy pops in and he's like, "Hey, you guys didn't study."
I hope so. I miss him. We need more hateful comments. So, anyway.
It's the purple, man.
It's the purple. Okay, so, welcome to Faith, Fiction, and Folklore, or as we like to call it, the Tri-F Podcast, where we try not to mess the podcast up. And today we are talking about the top 10 Bible lies, where Wes Huff and Michael Knowles are talking about falsities in Scripture. And we're going to see how this goes. We're going to react in real time. We have no idea where this is going to go. This is improv. That's what we're going to call it.
Might be fun.
It's not laziness. It's improv. So, all right. So here we go. All right.
Accused of belonging to a church that added books to the Bible.
I think it's more complex than that. Augustine considered the larger canon of Scripture, and Jerome considered the shorter canon of Scripture.
Does that ever shake your confidence in principle in the inerrancy of Scripture? You know him from bodying heretics on the
I'm
internet.
already annoyed.
If you
You're
don't
already
know
annoyed?
Wesley Huff, you certainly should. He is the Central Canada.
10 seconds in, we're already arguing about Sola Scriptura. Come on, man. No, I've never been bothered by the fact that some people had other Bible books or books of the Bible or whatever. But we know where those books came from. They're part of Jewish mysticism, Jewish lore. They were written later. you know, like the Maccabees period.
Yeah.
Like there were reasons, like William Lane Craig has a wonderful series on it. The title of it escapes me, but it's Defenders. It's on his channel, and he goes into how the books of the Bible were collected. Put together. So if you want to learn about how the canon of Scripture was decided, go watch William Lane Craig's series on that. He's got a really good series on it. So that's William Lane Craig. His YouTube channel is Reasonable Faith. And the class that he talked about it in is called Defenders. So if you're interested in that subject, go look that up. But for me, I'm much more simplistic. I'm like, yeah, the Catholic Church added books of the Bible to justify some of their doctrines. So, because they had certain sacraments and stuff, alms and whatever, that they wanted to set a precedent for. So I'm not particularly bothered by it. And I've researched it before, but it was years ago. So... Anyway, so let's see what's happening here.
Director for Apologetics Canada. Great pity that he has to live up in America's evil top hat. He was also born in Pakistan, making Wes my favorite Pakistani. Wes, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'll take it. I don't know how many Pakistanis you know, but I'll be your favorite one if you really want me to.
You've increased my number of Pakistani friends dramatically just by coming on the show right now.
Yeah, so, doubled them.
Wes, a lot of people, I think, were first introduced to you because you absolutely destroyed this kind of New Agey heretic on the internet. And we don't need to get too into it. It's a magnificent multi-hour...
His name was Billy Carson.
His name was Billy Carson, yep.
Conversation that ends in pyrotechnics. But it raises a lot of questions for people. A lot of people... believe things about the Bible and Christianity that are just not so. Some more outlandish than others, but some of these legends recur and recur. So I was wondering, since you are an expert in ancient texts and obviously apologetics, if you could, if I could tee these up and you could just completely knock them down. The first one, I've heard this for some time. Have you ever heard the story that Christ traveled to India? And I've heard some of the ways I've heard this told is Christ went to India and, studied with some Buddhist yogi or something and learned the sitar like George Harrison and then came back to the
We talked about this earlier.
Did we?
Yeah, we were talking about the Freemasons, how Jesus went east, and
I don't think the Freemasons brought that up.
Yeah.
Well, it's nonsense, whoever brought it up.
Well, that's why I said allegedly, remember?
Allegedly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Schneblin did say it and I just zoned out.
No, it was before. It was the first guy.
Well, they're both Schneblin.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it was the first video. He was talking about
talking
about Jesus went east.
Oh, okay. All right, I got you. Well, maybe the Freemasons do believe that.
And that's how you explain Christianity.
Yeah, well, this one actually comes from, there was an individual in the 19th century, a Russian individual named Nicholas Notrovich in 1894, who wrote a document where he claimed that Jesus traveled to India and Nepal. He said that he went to this Nepalese monastery and that the monks told him there, and he found documents that talked about Jesus of Nazareth, who went there and learned Hinduism on his ways through India and learned about Buddhism. And that's where, when he eventually comes back at around the age of 30, he gets his esoteric teachings. I mean, unfortunately...
Thank you for the love, whoever's sending it. We need it. On the chat, we're getting hearts, lots of hearts. We appreciate them.
They're probably for Wes Huff.
Yeah. Yeah.
This comes from the idea that there's somehow lost years of Jesus, because the Gospel of Luke in particular, it has this story of Jesus being a 12-year-old. But other than that, you get his birth story, and then you get him being a traveling itinerant Jewish rabbi as an adult. But even if we look at what we can see from the historical sources, from the Gospels, I mean, Luke tells us that narrative in chapter 2 verses 41 to 52, where the 12-year-old boy Jesus goes to the temple, and Mary and Joseph promptly lose the Son of God, and it says there that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And so that implies that he's at least there doing that, growing old as a human being. Matthew's gospel, actually, in chapter 13, when Jesus goes back to Nazareth to teach, the crowd, they respond by saying, isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't this Mary's name? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, and Simon and Judas? And so that at least implies, this is the equivalent I've heard.
That's a really good point, and I'm kind of embarrassed I hadn't thought of that before.
What?
That like the people in Nazareth are like, wait, isn't this Joseph's kid?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, obviously he was there if they said that. I mean, if you're going to go to India, you would have been there for a long time. So that kind of refutes that. Wow. I guess the whole idea of Christ going to India to learn voodoo or whatever just seems so stupid. I never gave it any thought. But anyway, kudos to Wes for putting that together.
So, no, explain that again.
Well,
because he was 13 at the time. Like they're saying he left around that age to go to India.
No, what they're saying is when Christ was in Nazareth, the town knew him as Joseph's kid. Well, if
At what age? What story are you referring to?
It's in it's in one of the Gospels. I don't remember exactly where, but when Christ, it's a specific story. When Christ goes back to Nazareth to preach, they're like, "Well, isn't this Joseph's son?"
When he was full grown.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they didn't believe him because they knew him growing up. Kind of that idea of the prophet having no honor in his hometown.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
But they could have known him from when he was 12 or 13.
Well,
right?
What they're saying is like if he'd went to India, like
don't
they
think it
would have been
refutes
gone
it.
for years. So
Yeah,
the odds of
sure.
them actually remembering him as Joseph's kid and like not believing him because they'd grown up with him, that would kind of be negated if he'd
Not
been
really.
gone for a long time.
I don't think so.
I think so. I think like how long would it take to get to India from Jerusalem in the first century? Like that'd be
for
quite
Jesus?
a trip. That'd be quite.
Like this?
I don't think.
I'm just messing with you.
So I hope so
I don't know.
because I got
Probably
confused.
years.
I'm like, wait, would he would teleport? I don't think that would
Probably
happen.
years.
Yeah, it would have been years. It would have been years. They probably wouldn't have remembered him that well if he'd been gone for a super long time. And plus, how long would it have taken for him to learn all the voodoo stuff or whatever?
Voodoo, it's Buddha.
Buddha. Oh, okay. My mistake. Yeah.
Voodoo
So-
comes from the Moor culture in France.
Ah.
And it transferred to New Orleans whenever
See,
the French ran the blacks out.
I don't know these things because I don't care. But
Yeah, Eastern mysticism
yeah,
is,
Eastern
a, is a
mysticism.
proper term.
There we go. That'll work. Yeah. So I imagine he would have been gone too long for them to have remembered him and kind of been disdainful of him,
You could say that, but I mean, I feel like Jesus would have been a pretty memorable character. I don't feel like they would forget him after, 10 years or whatever.
Maybe. I don't know. This is going to be a weird question, but how memorable is somebody who's perfect?
I would say pretty memorable.
You think so? I
yeah,
figure
why
people
wouldn't
would
they?
forget about him because, he didn't get on anybody's nerves.
We got on
But
everybody's
maybe
nerves. This is better than everybody.
Oh, okay, so it was like this hidden resentment thing.
Yeah,
Like, oh
yeah.
it's that perfect kid. Now he's gonna come back and tell us what to do.
Yep, no doubt.
Okay, I stand corrected, Cody. You got a perfect kid would just infuriate everybody and burn himself in everyone's minds. So
Yep.
fair enough. Fair enough.
It said of someone saying like, hey, isn't this the guy who we went to prom with? Like they know who Jesus is, right? So they're very familiar with him. So if he had left and become some sort of traveling Jewish sage who learned Buddhism and Hinduism, you wouldn't get this kind of response, because what we see when we eventually do get Jesus as the adult is that he is a first century Second Temple Jewish rabbi. We're not seeing multilingual, cosmopolitan, ecumenist guru. We're seeing what we should see in terms of his teaching and in terms of what exactly fits for the time frame.
I guess that's another good point. It's like name one Eastern concept Jesus would have talked about. Like something that you could identify with the Eastern mysticism. Like you can identify the stuff he was talking about with the Jewish culture, but if he went and learned a bunch of Eastern Indian stuff, wouldn't you be able to make comparisons with their works or whatever?
Do you know the works?
I have no clue. I know that Buddha sat under a tree for a long time. I mean, I do. I shouldn't say I don't know their stuff because I have studied it before. It's just.
I mean, how would you compare it if you don't know it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I guess I do know it, and it seems to me like the ideas of Eastern Hinduism and Buddhism are antithetical to like the Jewish culture, especially. You know, it's a lot of.
I know, but like Jesus ran around telling the Jewish culture they were wrong.
About the prophecy, about the messianic prophecy, yes. About their understanding about the law. Yeah, but he didn't affirm anything from India. You know what I mean?
Well, if he's using different terminology, then it's going to be hard to kind of pick out.
I don't think there's there's
Will
nothing
Donahue
comparable.
That out pretty well.
Will Donahue. There is nothing comparable to the untouchables in Christ's theology, let's say. Like the idea of
the untouchables.
Well, in India, the untouchables are like if you're like a bad person, you're reincarnated as like the lowest social class. And so the people in the upper social class, the caste system, like there's nothing comparable to that. So, but
that's
Christ's
a modern
theology,
thing that could have happened over the last 2,000 years.
Is it a modern thing? I was under the impression it wasn't.
It's been 2,000 years.
I don't know, man. I think that caste system's been around for quite a while. Actually, this is another thing that we need to talk about. There is at some point we need to do an episode on it, and I barely know anything about it. But I watched a video that I found very interesting. Like, there is a belief that there was a monotheistic religion in ancient China that was comparable to Judaism before like Hinduism and Buddhism and stuff. And I don't remember the name of the deity and stuff. Like, it escapes me, but we'll have to do a video on that because it's actually really interesting because those ancient Chinese symbols actually correlate with like Jewish stories like Noah's Ark and stuff like that.
Okay.
So they have like parallels and stuff like that, but I don't remember the name of the deity, but they had like a sacrificial system and all sorts of stuff. Like, it seemed almost identical to Judaism, which makes sense under the young earth creation model because, the way that they migrated from the Fertile Crescent, there would have been an offshoot of Judaism in the East at that time. So yeah, the timelines match up with young earth creationism and like the way that they imagine the migration patterns going. So it's interesting. I'll have to do that. Maybe that's a future episode. So anyway.
Hey, speaking of China, what do you think dragons were real?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I do. Yeah, I think like basically I think dinosaurs lived with people. I think they've got living dino tissue in some of these fossils. Like you're not getting living tissue from fossils that are millions and millions of years old. No way. So I think some of these creatures were
carbon doesn't even last more than 12,000 years.
I am very out of date on my carbon work, but I imagine you're right. Like it's radiometric dating is dumb. But anyway.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Moving on.
Indeed.
Okay, Trevor asked, how old is young Earth? I don't know. Like the theory of young Earth, I imagine as old as Christianity because there's always been a back and forth about whether or not
7 or 8.
Like the theory says the Earth is approximately somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 years old, depending on how you look at the genealogies in Genesis. But as far as like the theory of young Earth itself and its age, that I don't know. I mean, I would say it would be as old as Christianity because there's been factions in the group. Some people thinking that the creation story is allegorical and some people thinking that it's literal. I mean, that's, from what I understand, that debate's as old as Origin. But I mean, I don't know. And I have no knowledge about what the like Jewish people before Christianity thought about it and how they interpreted it. I would imagine they interpreted it as literal considering how seriously they take the genealogies. So I mean, I would say it's as old as the religions themselves, So 6,000 to 10,000 years would be the short answer.
Yep.
Jesus is a person of his day in terms of being a first century Jewish individual. He's communicating Jewish things, and his influence is the Hebrew scriptures. And that makes sense.
Yes, on the Emmaus Road, I
thank you, Turtle Chief.
Recall our Lord opening up the scriptures, not the Bhagavad Gita. And even, as you mentioned, Christ grows in wisdom and in stature. He is subject to his mother and stepfather after they find him in the temple. So there's another irony, which is there's a story that St. Thomas the Apostle goes to India. And I've actually been pretty close to where he was. He should have landed down by the tip, and he died in Chennai, India, on the other coast. And I think there's a mountain there, Mount St. Thomas, I believe, where his body supposedly is. And there will be people who question this. They'll say it's so ridiculous to suggest that the Apostle Thomas actually made it all the way to India. But it's not at all ridiculous to suggest that Christ himself, about whose wanderings we know quite a lot more, that he went to India and learned how to become a yogi or whatever, and then came back, and somehow no one knew about this for 1,800 years.
If you want to learn how to edit really well from professional Hollywood editors, we're going to show you the stuff that nobody else is teaching.
The next one. The notion that the Genesis creation story is copied word for word from the Enuma Elish. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but this notion that the Genesis story is totally derivative, even
I do indeed
from a pagan tradition, and so there's no reason to really give it any credence in a particularly Christian way.
Yeah, well, you didn't mispronounce it, so you're not off to a bad start in that regard.
All right.
But the Enuma Elish it's a Babylonian origin story. And I think that's important to highlight that, Genesis 1 is a creation story. The Enuma Elish is the Babylonian origin story. Now, there's a subtle but important difference there, because the surrounding ancient Near Eastern cultures, they believed that matter in the created order was more or less eternal. And deities come from the creation, whereas in the Bible, creation comes from the one true deity. And that's important to note too, Michael, because the Enuma Elish is polytheistic as its assumption. The idea of a single creator God who not only makes everything, but exists outside of time, matter, and space. That's a feature that separates something like the Enuma Elish and the book of Genesis. And in the Enuma Elish, the slain gods, because there's this big battle, they become things like the earth, and humanity springs from the dead gods. So Tiamat, the sea goddess, is slain by Marduk, and her body is split into two, and half becomes the earth and half becomes the sky. And that humanity is brought forth from the blood of Kwenku, Tiamat's advisor, who also loses the battle along with her. So we also...
What a strange decomposition process. But anyway... No, I think that's one thing that's important to understand about the Bible is those first 5 books in particular, and especially the creation story, it's kind of a protest letter against polytheism, because polytheism was the popular religion of the day, and to say God created the heavens and the earth is a pretty definitive statement, and that God made everything, and that didn't come from all these different body parts. I mean, they were writing with the direct purpose, or the author of Genesis was writing with the direct purpose of refuting the pagan cultures around them. So, gotta bear that in mind. So, yeah, this idea that it's copied from a pagan work is kind of dumb, because it goes out of its way to refute all that.
Mm-hmm. Have no linguistic parallels. So you can see the content is very, very different. And so if we're ascribing a word for word or a plagiarism, I mean, all you have to do is read each text and see, listen, that's not what we're dealing with here. And then if...
Bad intro, I missed you. I missed you so much. I was predestined to wear a vest today, huh? But I gave up the tie. I gave up the tie and I traded it out for a 70s collar. And I have you to thank, sir.
We look at the languages themselves, the Akkadian and the Hebrew of the Enuma Elish, and then Genesis chapter 1. The parallels, such as copying or plagiarizing for something like the Enuma Elish in the Akkadian text, and then the Hebrew Genesis, I don't think evidence literary borrowing, and there are no legitimate connections between the content. So though both are Semitic languages originally as they're written, I don't think we have an issue of causation, right? We have an issue of correlation in sort of broad ideas that are general ancient themes. But in terms of trying to establish a correlation versus causation issue, if we want to say that something like the Enuma Elish is word for word of Genesis, we need to establish a causative link, and we just don't have that.
So why would people say this? Is the answer as simple as just sheer ignorance and presumption? Is there any other reason why they would draw this parallel?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of that. I think it also is, it's not that you can't draw parallels. There are generalities that we can find. It's similar to when people say that Jesus is also copied from ancient pagan deities, in that this is sometimes called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where you have this image of a Texan who is firing shots into the side of a barn, and then he promptly goes and he draws a target around the closest cluster of shots, making himself look like a great shot, right? And so if you find...
I feel like Wes does that.
Maybe. We need to... I need to do my refutation, because he has an opinion on Mark 16 I don't like. So I do need to go after Wes Huff at some point, but... I like that he's making fun of Ammon Hillman and Billy Carson, so I like, enjoy following that. A bad intro said, saw you guys live and want to just say, hey, Wes drives me bananas, so I'll be on in a second. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Hello, and we appreciate you just dropping by. So, and Turtle Chief says, yeah, he is good at huffing. The dad jokes commence. So
that's a mess.
That's a mess. That's a mess. Yeah, no, I do need to go on to this whole thing with Mark 16. I have some actually very interesting stuff on Mark 16, but yeah. Anyway. All right. Okay.
It'd be interesting.
He says,
I'd be willing to listen to it.
Yeah. Bad Intro says, haha, enjoy your guys live and come back to the true church. Love you guys. Love you too, man. You have a great night. We'll see ya. All right, so we've got the sharpshooter fallacy. He just mentioned that.
Enough of these parallels. You can draw conclusions, but that's not honest with what's going on. So you can say, okay, well, here we have
Ethiopian Bible here.
Ooh, yeah.
That the Ethiopian Bible is the oldest Bible that we have, and therefore, I actually don't know that this would necessarily follow even that dubious premise. Therefore, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the first church, perhaps even the true church. I like the Ethiopians quite a lot, but that seems like a bold claim.
Yeah, so there are a number of assumptions going on there. I mean, the first copies of the Bible that we have in terms of Old Testament, New Testament, the Old Testament is Hebrew, the New Testament is Greek, and we have Old Testament Hebrew copies like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Greek translation of the Old Testament in the collection of the Septuagint. And then we have the Greek New Testament. So the Ethiopian Bible is written in a language called Ge'ez. And our oldest copy of that comes in the form of a collection of manuscripts called the Garima Gospels.
I just want to point out that the only thing you can really prove with something being the oldest is that nobody read it. So... just food for thought. I don't think measuring something as the oldest, therefore the best, is a very good criterion. And I think that's one of the major problems with textual criticism. But
yeah,
I think you have to go with consensus. I don't think you should go with age anyhow. So,
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Potentially as early as the 4th century, but the extant manuscripts go anywhere between the 4th and the 6th centuries. But this is only the 4 Gospels. And they're very...
Turtle Chief says a time machine would help. Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Much a translation from the original Greek into the ancient Ethiopic language of Ge'ez. We, of course, have copies of each individual book of the Bible that exist in independent scrolls and books that predate these by centuries. So both, in the form of the Hebrew Old Testament and even the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and then the Greek New Testament. The earliest copy of a Genesis to Revelation Ethiopian Bible actually comes in the ballpark somewhere between the 14th and 16th centuries. So we're talking Middle Ages. So I hear this online. No, I hear this online a lot. I, to be totally honest, don't know where it originated. But there's a picture of an old Ethiopian guy holding what looks like a very, very old manuscript. And then you always see the headlines of, first Bible ever discovered. We actually know the story of how the Ethiopian Bible kind of originated. There is a document that a number of documents actually that tell us that Syrian missionaries brought versions of the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament and other Jewish literature and the Greek New Testament down to Ethiopia into what was then called the Kingdom of Aksum, where it was translated into Ge'ez in and around the 4th century. So we have that cataloged and we can pinpoint where the Ethiopian Bible actually found its inception. And it is very much a translation from the Greek that pre-existed it and did pre-exist it, arguably going back to the originals by the authors we see in our New Testament in the 1st century.
Yeah, this one was a bit of a head scratcher when I read it because
So
of
how
the
is
fact
how is
that
he?
I'm certainly not a.
How is he debunking that claim that the? I mean, that seems pretty legit. Translated from Greek in the 4th century.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
what's the problem?
I think the issue is some of the books of the Bible aren't canon. So it's got some of the Apocrypha books in it, and people kind of bicker about which is the original canon.
It made
and
it
which
through the
isn't.
government establishment at the time.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, there's older stuff, basically. The Greek translations are older, so this anthology, let's say, isn't necessarily a legitimate one, because we can figure out where those books were back translated from, I suppose, would be the idea. But yeah, I think it doesn't get too complicated until you start trying to figure out what's apocrypha versus what's apocryphal versus what's canon, if I can talk. So, yeah.
Bible scholar, but because the Ethiopian Bible is translated from the Septuagint, that means the Septuagint pre-exists the Ethiopian Bible. I think people just like it because Ethiopia sounds kind of exotic, and because they like the idea of the Book of Enoch, which is included in the Ethiopian canon, but not in the Western canon. Maybe we'll get to that in a little bit.
And in line with our fungus theme, apparently the next one is, did mushrooms start Christianity?
Before we get to that more legitimate and substantive question, though, I want to raise another really stupid point that people.
What?
That's the Santa Claus and the cross mushroom thing.
Yeah, Santa Claus and the mushroom. Oh, are we gonna learn about the purple? Can we learn more about the purple? We need to learn more about the purple.
Bring up, namely,
what about the Septuagint? You mean the Septuagint?
What is the Septuagint? Trevor.
Septuagint's one of the translations of the Old Testament, good sir. Yes. Spelling is your friend.
The original Old Testament was Hebrew, right?
Yeah, but there's multiple translations.
Is the Greek?
Is the Septuagint the Greek?
I believe so.
We're getting on Google, boys and girls. Give me a second.
I might be wrong, but
I think you're wrong, but we'll Google it.
It's been a lot of years since I started looking at all these
canon
books and not canon books.
Septuagint. Okay. No, you're right, Cody. It is.
Right.
Let's see. According to Google, a Greek version of the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, including the Apocrypha, made for Greek-speaking Jews in Egypt in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC and adopted by the early Christian church. So you were right, good sir. I stand corrected. All right.
Nice to meet you, corrected.
Aha.
I'm Cody.
That's another horrible joke. What was those dad jokes? Dad, I'm hungry. Hi, hungry. I'm dad.
Yeah, I told that to Callie the other day. I should really apologize. When you said I'm hungry and I said, hi, hungry, I'm Cody. Yeah, it was rough.
Just makes people hate you. Just automatically hate you.
It makes people hate you. So dad jokes make people hate you. Yeah. She shook her head, yes.
Yeah. Colonel Chief says, my bad, I spelled it funny. Yeah, you're good, man. You're good. Google got it for us. Yep. Commies.
That magic mushrooms.
This guy's a commie.
Like psilocybin or what, kind of spooky psychedelic stuff.
Hey, look, purple!
Is actually at the heart.
Oh, it's the purple.
Look,
babe, it's the purple.
I don't have a bong on set that I can rip before we delve into this very silly suggestion, but have you heard it before?
Yes, I have. It seems to have started with an individual named John Marco Allegro, who was a legitimate Dead Sea Scrolls scholar.
Yep.
So this was an individual who worked on part of the original editorial team that was evaluating the Dead Sea Scrolls when they were discovered, between the late 1940s and the 1960s.
Sorry, what?
I think the name of his book was The Mushroom and the Cross.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the fella.
I feel like he had some kind of like psychedelic trip, and he was like, "Oh, I saw Jesus in the mushroom." And
yeah, he's like, you know what? You know what would make my parents mad? If I said mushrooms started Christianity, that'd really tick them off.
Yeah.
Trevor says, or Turtle Chief says, dad jokes are good for the soul. Lies.
70s. And so this was an individual who actually had credibility in terms of his credentials. However, he wrote a book called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, where he really starts to go off the rails.
Now, this was, Wes, if you don't mind the interjection, that book came out in like 1970 or something, right? So we're kind of reaching peak hippie, psychedelia, druggy. So I'm not downplaying his credentials. I know the guy's a real scholar on the Dead Sea Scrolls, but you know, that time period, I mean, who wasn't taking magic mushrooms back then?
Right. Well, I wasn't around, so I wasn't. So I can at least exclude myself from that group. But yeah, it's interesting because I've read Allegra's work, and actually his fellow contemporaries chastised him quite a bit because a lot of his thesis was predicated on etymology, which is the study and origin of words. And he connected particular important words in the Bible, like the word Christ. And then he kind of made these causation links that he saw to a few other religious texts, and then to some of these ancient fertility cults having what he described as hallucinogenic experiences with plants. But based on this, you know, he came to this conclusion that Jesus did not exist, and the Gospels were more or less a hoax, and that what Christianity turned into was nothing more than a misunderstanding of ancient fertility cult.
Hey, look, an ad!
That the object of worship was a psychedelic mushroom. And one thing to keep in mind is that no scholar from any background, now I mean this honestly, religious or secular, either in Allegro's day or now, accepts Allegro's theories and conclusions based on the actual arguments that he makes. And because his theory is fringe, doesn't necessarily mean it's false, right?
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems a little unlikely that something like mushrooms would create an idea as complicated as Christianity. Seems like mushrooms would be a little chaotic. Am I right in that assumption that mushrooms would make your ideas a little chaotic or a little dark, perhaps?
Maybe.
Like what kind of messaging would somebody on shrooms actually invent? Or what kind, if somebody was on shrooms, what kind of religion would they make? Like really?
I think a karmic religion.
Think so?
Karma based, yeah.
Okay, why? Because I'm starting from zero here.
It makes you see things about yourself, and it tells you that you need to change patterns about yourself.
How so? How does it tell you to do that?
It's a mirror into your soul. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, honestly. Callie, you want to get on here and talk about mushrooms?
Was that a heck no or a non-committal yes?
Non-committal no. It's like a mirror.
Okay.
But don't look in the mirror, because that's too much.
Let me
If you actually look in a mirror on mushrooms, you'll freak yourself out because you can see into your soul.
Not your soul. Not everybody feels that.
Sounds like she wants to get on and talk.
Okay. Well, I'm starting from zero.
I think that you say things very directly, but that's not for everybody.
Okay. Well, let me poke a little bit.
Poke away.
All right. So wouldn't these ideas regarding mushrooms, wouldn't they be built on presuppositions you already have?
Yes.
Okay. So where would the religion come from? Like, say you didn't have any presuppositions, say maybe, like in that time, you had like the Greek pantheon, perhaps. So how would you build a religion like Christianity from the presuppositions of the Greek pantheon using mushrooms?
I don't think he would. I think he was mad at religion because his book was written in the 70s. I think he was mad at religion
and his mom and dad.
And his mom and dad. He needed to forgive his mom and dad.
Yes. You need to make up with your father.
You need to make up with your father. Clean your room. Yeah. And then he did mushrooms, and he was like, oh, yeah, see, I was right. The mushrooms told me.
See, I think This is my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the mushrooms make you see a bunch of random crap, and you infer meaning into that based on what you already know about yourself, what you kind of know subconsciously. It's giving you a visual way to articulate what you already know
What you
inside.
feel.
Yeah, what you feel. Like it's a visual way to understand how you feel, like an allegorical way to understand what you feel.
Yeah.
That'd be
And
my...
sometimes your feelings are not true.
That's true, yeah.
But then you could totally read into something like the mushroom and the cross.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Oops.
Oops.
Accidentally wrote a whole book on nothing.
Pretty much. All right. Well, I'm going to skip ahead from this topic because I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Sure.
Let's see. After that, we've got originally taught reincarnation. I think we'll stop after this one, but I would like to do this one next week because there are some other questions that we kind of come up across quite a bit. You got the Catholics added books, Protestants removed books, the Emerald Tablets. We got to learn more about the Emerald Tablets, man. We'll just keep going on about those. And let's see, what else? Jesus was a copy of pagan gods. I've heard that from Bart Ehrman. Preborn, that's an ad for a charity that I would recommend, by the way. And then the Trinity was invented. I think you and I could go back and forth for a while on that one. And then Jesus, the story of Jesus and the woman caught in adultery is not found in the oldest. Yeah, I could go on that one.
Yeah. I'd say we just hit that reincarnation.
Yeah, and maybe we'll pick up the rest of these because there's some good questions in here I'd like to talk about, and this would be a good springboard for them. So we'll hit this. We'll hit the rest of this next week. So,
all right.
Well, let's end with the reincarnation question.
Reincarnation, not resurrection, but reincarnation. There's some theory floating around that the early church taught reincarnation, but that this truth of the faith was condemned at the Second Council of Constantinople in the 6th century. I was not there at the council. I don't think reincarnation was condemned there because I don't think it was ever taught in the first place. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right. It is an interesting accusation because we know approximately what the Second Council of Constantinople was. It was called for the goal of doubling down on the Chalcedonian Creed, which affirmed dogmatically that Jesus was both fully God and fully man, combating the heresy of Nestorianism, which taught that Jesus' divinity and humanity were separate and that Jesus was actually comprised of two separate persons, the human Jesus and the divine Logos. And so you would first have to establish that something like reincarnation was even on the table for this conversation. And also you have to account for all of the manuscripts of the Bible that predate the 6th century and would not have been known at that time, because we have copies of, say, the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Matthew, certainly all of the Pauline epistles that were buried in places like Egypt and Syria hundreds of years before the Council of Constantinople ever happened. So if we're pulling out a doctrine, we really have to ascribe some sort of almost omnipotent ability for the individuals at this time to go find these manuscripts, alter them, put them back in the sand for us to find, in the 19th century, and date them to that time and do this systematically throughout all of the ancient world. And I think this brings up an interesting point, Michael. These types of accusations, reincarnation not being compatible with historical Christianity or ancient Judaism aside, what this assumes is impossible because we know from the dissemination of how the Christian documents were copied and then spread throughout the ancient world that it negated any one group or one person controlling the text of those documents at any one point in time for this exact reason, because the early Christians were very eager to get these documents in the hands of people. And so within only a couple hundred years, you have copies up into the British Isles, you have copies of these books all over North Africa, the Middle East, into Asia and Europe. And so we just find copies, even if they're fragmentary, of the documents of, the Old and New Testaments all over the place. And so if anybody, pick a council, Nicaea, Constantinople, you can insert any name of any ecumenical council that took place. If you want to say that they did something in terms of editing a doctrine, or a concept, you have to account for Christians writing in previous centuries, the manuscripts of the Bible, and it's an impossibility.
Yeah, it must have been a real hassle, to send the various bishops all to the ends of the earth to secretly edit all of these manuscripts. But on the point of reincarnation, I have a friend of mine who's Jewish, and she's relatively conservative. I don't know exactly what flavor of Judaism she belongs to, but she told me that Jews believe in reincarnation. And I thought, that's new to me. I mean, I guess my only text is the Hebrew Bible. I haven't, read like the Talmud, or really no one's read the Talmud. It's very, very long. And then I looked into it, and it seemed like maybe there was some kind of Kabbalah concept that maybe touched on reincarnation, but I don't know. Have you ever come across that, or do you kind of limit your scope of inquiry to Christianity?
I mean, it's certainly not a concept that would have squared with ancient Judaism. So like pre-70 AD, before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, you have a very strong line of thinking of the resurrection, right? Which then leads into what we believe as Christians about the resurrection of the dead. You even read something like in the Maccabees, first, second, and third Maccabees, when the Jews are being slaughtered, and we have instances of, their hands being threatened with being cut off, and them holding out their hands and say, cut them off, I'll get new ones in the resurrection. The resurrection is not reincarnation. Those are fundamentally different ideas. And I can say, especially during this period, during like the Hasmonean era, when you have stories like first, second, and third Maccabees taking place, the understanding of the resurrection of the dead is very concrete, and that plays directly into what we see in the New Testament theology. So I think at face value, I don't know about, say, like mystic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism. I'm not an expert in that necessarily. Maybe some rabbi in the Middle Ages gave credence to it somewhere. But
okay, so you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had a little snowball of a thought there. I've never attributed the word reincarnation to the word resurrection. But I'm just like sitting here playing with it in my head. I mean, I find, is it Revelation where all the dead people get up out of the graves and... Is that right?
Not quite, no. But they do get up out of the grave. They are resurrected, yes.
See, to me, that would make more sense if it was like if the final death was the death of your lineage. Like if the demons won with your lineage.
Okay.
They killed you off. Like that's the dead. And so they are brought back in another person. That would make more sense to me than, the zombie thing that you get the picture of when you read that.
Well, I never got the zombie picture, but I will say this.
I mean, when you talk about people getting up out of their graves, that's what comes in my brain. I'm just saying.
I would imagine them fully restored, but okay. No, I don't believe in the reincarnation concept myself, but
I'm not saying I believe that. I was just like I said, I've never heard those two words interchanged.
I've never heard of anybody like conflating those two terms. Yeah. I do have a question, like, what does the Bible mean about John the Baptist being the new Elijah, though? Like,
right. I mean,
if reincarnation were to be a concept, I would find it there, but I don't think that's what the Bible means. But my question is, well, what does it mean then when it calls John the Baptist like Elijah? So I've always kind of been a little curious about that.
That's all I can think of.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never thought of anything else.
Yeah. So if somebody more studious than myself has an answer to that, I'm all ears. But
maybe we should hit up old Wes Huff.
Yeah, there we go.
Hey Wes, explain.
Yeah, but no, I mean, I don't buy it myself, but I do wonder what they meant about, John the Baptist being the new Elijah and everything. So, I think we're going to stop it there for this evening. Yeah. I would like to continue this video, though, actually, because there are some concepts that, I mean, I need to pull up some sources and stuff, particularly on the woman caught in adultery one, but I have thoughts on that subject. So we'll pick this one up next week. Cody, got any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. It's been a good episode. I really appreciate everybody coming in and hanging out.
Yeah,
So,
I do as well. So, all right, I guess we're going to call it a night. So, this is the final episode of the evening. So, with all that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.